I got a beautiful little Colt 3220 Police Positive Special. This is a little gun from 1920. And it's a lot of fun to shoot. It's actually small. May not appear so here, but it really is. This is the D frame, which is, I believe, the same thing used for the Detective Special, the Cobra, that sort of thing. So it's small. In order to grip it, I have to put my little finger underneath there. I can only get the two fingers onto the grips, but once I do that, you know, it's all right, and it's smooth. See, staging there, you know, pow. Yeah, single action, of course, is typical Colt. The barrel is a little bit rough on the inside, and that probably accounts for some of the accuracy issues I've had, although the 3220 can be notoriously difficult to come up with good loads for. And that's what we're going to be working on today, is the 3220 cartridge, loading for it. And I think if you're new to reloading, this could be helpful for any revolver cartridge, because so many of the rules will be the same no matter what you're loading for. The 3220 has its own few peculiarities that we'll have to take into account. It also is a cartridge that loves hand loading for several reasons. One, it's virtually obsolete, and finding factory ammo for it is almost impossible. But it's become very popular again in cowboy action shooting and such. Now let's back up a second and get some history on it. It was developed by Winchester in about 1882-83 for the 1873 lever action, the gun that won the West. And I believe the first chambering for that rifle was 4440. Winchester made 3 cartridges for it, the 4440, the 3840, and the 3220, that were all chambered again in pistols. Colt chambered the Model P in all of those, the Model P being the single action army, you know, John Wayne and all that. The Peacemaker, P for Peacemaker, I guess, yeah. So cowboys or people out west could carry the same cartridge for their rifle and for their handgun. And that's something that's, that's something that's become kind of popular again, what with the modern carbines that we're seeing chambered in 9mm. So people have their 9mm short barrel rifles and carbines and AR-15 pistols and that sort of thing. And then they also have their handgun in 9mm. Other calibers too. I think you see it in 10mm too. Anyway, so it's not new, nothing new under the sun. The 3220 in its heyday was tremendously popular. It was the, let's see, about 1904, I think it was the #1 selling cartridge, and from Winchester or whoever, and it was also the #1 selling die from the Ideal Tool hand loading company at that time, back in the early 1900s. So it really was. Now this little gun here was offered in 3220, and it was also offered in 38 Special. And eventually the 38 Special eclipsed it. Smith & Wesson was making them. Altogether, there were probably about 250,000 3220 revolvers made by Colt, who made the Model P, the police, the official police, this one, and the Army model, whatever it's called, the double action Army. Anyway. And Smith & Wesson made their M&P for it. And altogether, like I said, about 250,000 of them were made. But the 38 Special was also being offered in all of those, and it eclipsed eventually the 3220. But this was an extremely popular gun with police because it didn't weigh very much, and it was still reasonably effective. And so, you know, they like that. All right, we're gonna do the reloading here on the Hollywood Senior Turret Press, and I'll be guiding you along the way. We're going to do our priming with this hand primer from RCBS, and I'm going to be showing you some real close-ups of all this stuff as we go along. I got a new camera for that, and that's going to be fun. We're using a set of Redding dyes and also a dye from Lee. I'm going to be using 4 dyes to load this thing, and I'll tell you why when we get into that. The bullets that we're going to be using are from Badman bullets. I mean, how could you go wrong with Badman bullets? And there they are, a whole bunch of them. And these are 115 grain cast bullets, and they're sized to .314. We'll get into some numbers on that here in just a second. So that's enough background. I think it's time for us to get started and do some loading. Let me start out with showing you, where will we start? First things first, let's take our tray full of brass, some of which is still new, unfired, and some of it's been fired one time. And so we'll get into that. Let's start by lubricating them. Hard on the knees here. What we're going to do is lubricate these cases because this is a bottleneck cartridge, and as such, it has a very, very slight, but it's a real bottleneck, and as a consequence, you can't use a carbide dye with it. You have to use a regular steel dye. Let me dump them out. And that means they have to be lubricated. And for lubrication, use my home brew here, the Lano Heat, I call it. It's lanolin and alcohol mixed together. And the lanolin I bought just as lanolin from Amazon. And the alcohol is Heat, H-E-E-T, a product used in the automotive industry and available at every parts house in the world, probably. But it's basically pure isopropyl alcohol. So, okay, here we have our 4 dyes, and we'll start over here. That's the full-length sizer. This is the expander dye, and this is the cedar. And then over here, the little orphan is the Lee crimping dye, factory crimp dye. Now, let's look inside. They all appear to be the same thing, but when you look inside, we'll see that this one has a decapping pin, and that's all it does is it knocks out the old primer. Then up inside the dye, we can see that there's a shoulder up in there, and that's where I was talking about the bottleneck. As the case goes up inside, the neck of it gets pressed down smaller than the rest of the case. So here's a case, and kind of hard to see it, isn't it? I told you it's just very slight. There you go, you can see it there. It's about the last 1/4 of it drops down in diameter, and that's the bottleneck. It's what goes up in here and gets fully resized. And then our next one is the expander dye. Now this one, the body does nothing. It's just a big open hole. All the work on this one is done by this stem. And this stem is pressed down into the case, and at that point the case will have been resized and it won't be an easy fit like you saw right here. But now you notice there's a step, a shoulder, right there as it steps up in size. And at that point, it gets expanded larger than the bullet. This part down here is smaller than the bullet. This part right here is the size of the bullet, or maybe 1/1000th of an inch more. And from that point, it goes up into this tapered part, and it gets flared out. And you just don't want very much, just enough so that you can get the bullet started in there. Incidentally, I polished that by chucking it up in a drill press and using wet and dry sandpaper, 400, 600, and 1200 grit, and polished it out, maybe even some steel wool at the end. And so there was that. The last one is, well, no, I'm sorry, the last of the redding dyes is the seeding dye. And it has a stem up in the top that will, where'd my bullet go? That will press down against the nose of the bullet. The nose of the bullet will fit right up inside that stem, and it'll be pressed down into place. Now, this dye also has a shoulder up inside. Actually, it has two. You see the first step, that's the bottleneck, and the neck goes up on into that point, and then above that is another step where it's a severe step, and it causes the end of the, or the mouth of the cartridge to roll over and crimp inside against the bullet. Well, this case is very, very, very thin. It has a very thin wall, and it's rather fragile. That's the weakest thing about this case, is that very, very thin mouth. Yeah, you can kind of see that bottleneck that starts right about there. And you have to be really careful, and if you try to crimp that in one go with this dye, that is to seat the bullet and crimp all in one fell swoop, you're going to have a problem. And besides that, Lee, those good guys at Lee, have an even better solution. Let's see if I can show you what that is. I don't know if we're going to be able to see down in there. Yep, there it is. You see those cuts in there? That is a sleeve that is cut in 4 places. And the end of it, the very end of it, can squeeze together. And that sleeve is this movable part right there at the bottom. You see how that moves? Whoa, get back and focus. When that moves in, now it's up against a sloping surface that as you press it further and further up in there, it'll get tighter and tighter until those gaps disappear, and it's, as Dizzy Dean would say, it squoze together all it can squeeze. And the case, as we can see, is positioned so that the neck, I guess we can see it, I don't know, it's pretty, let's see, will it open it, brighten up any? Well, not much. But you can see it's right there in that. And once we get it on the press, I'll show you again how it tightens up. But that's a look at our dyes. We're going to take advantage of the turret here and put all 4 dyes up here so we can switch back and forth if we need to. Don't particularly. And you may or may not recall that I have an adapter for this press that allows me to use standard shell holders. And if you ever get a Hollywood press, that's a must-have, because they use special shell holders. Now, you can buy these shell holders for different calibers. Getting one for a 3220 might be a stretch. First dye that we'll do is our full-length sizing dye. And let me get you in a little closer here for a look at how we set this one up. This one's really straightforward. You just run your shell holder all the way to the top. In other words, run the press as far as it'll go. Bring it down until it touches. And then raise up on your handle turn it in about 1/8 of a turn, and there, you feel that little, that's a little too much. You'll feel it bump. All right, watch the link arms when it snaps into place. See that? Right there. It makes contact right there and stops moving, but you push the handle that little bit, and now you're good. And then tighten it up. Now, a trick that I have learned is to get yourself a pair of these, and these are wrenches that are called Cannon plug wrenches or whatever, but they're used in the electronics industry to put together big electrical connectors like audio connectors. They have soft jaws and they won't scratch up your dies, and they will hold them dead tight. This will give you an interesting vantage point. You're looking up at the die, and what I'm doing is screwing the decapping pin down, and you see it come through, and you want it sticking down about 3/8 of an inch, something like that, and just finger tighten it, and that's it. Now remember what I said about the expander die. What we're going to do is screw this one in until the bottom of it touches the shell holder and has that same slight over center snap. Then we will put this one in here, and with a case up inside, we will run this down until we feel that little shoulder hit. And then very slowly we'll start screwing it down, trial and error, until we get just the right amount of flare. All right, here we go. Step 1, screw it in until it touches the shell holder right there, and then back it off, screw it just a little bit until we get that little bit of snap. Tighten down the ring and use our jaws of life to tighten it up. Okay, we've got our stem right here. We're going to put that down inside and start it. Take our case and run it up in the die, push it down till it snaps into place. Now, we turn this screw on top, and I can feel it going down into the case, and I'm feeling it there. It's getting pretty tight. Now what I need is a bullet, and I want to see if this bullet will sit down in there, and I believe it will already. Let's see, let's give it just a little more. What I'm looking to do is see if it'll sit down in it. It's not quite going down in it, so I want to give it just a little more and then bump. It's still not quite going down into it. Give it just a little more. And like I said, it's trial and error. You don't want to overdo it. It's just starting to flare a little bit. I think just a touch more will do it. Yeah, let's see. I believe that will probably work. Let's try just a hair more. Yeah, there we go. Yep. See, it sits there by itself. If you can wobble it around like that and it won't fall off, then you're good. Now, what you do is tilt up here so you can see what I'm talking about. So now you take that lock nut, you hold this thing very carefully. Take that lock nut and tighten it like that. There it is. And now you've got your belling adjustment, as it were. And there it is, and our bullet drops right down into it. Let's try one more case here. First thing, let's do the case. Let's run it through the full-length sizer. Okay. Nice having the turret, you see. And now we run it up into here, and there it goes. It sits right there. And it didn't fall off. It tipped over, but it didn't fall. Right. So that takes care of die number 2. All right, now to adjust our final die, this is the bullet cedar die. There's going to be 2 things going on here. First, let me show you. We'll run this case up in the die. We'll adjust the die down until we feel the crimping groove touching the shoulder, or the mouth rather, of the case. And then we'll back it off at least 1 turn, and then lock it off, because that will be correctly adjusted for no crimp. Then we'll put a bullet on it and keep adjusting the stem until the bullet is pushed in the correct distance. What is the correct distance? Well, you see the bullet has a crimping groove in it. And so what we'll do is push it down until the mouth of the cartridge is just below that top ridge, and it will crimp right down in there. And for those that don't know about cast bullets, that's a waxy lubricant, a wax and oil or petroleum or lubricant of some sort mixed together. All right, here we go. Here is our seating die, and we'll back that stem off, run the case up in there, run this thing down until we feel it jamming up against the mouth of that case, right about there. So let's back off from that just a little bit. And now let's tighten this with our plug pliers. Now here's our stem, and as you can see, the stem is made to fit right onto that bullet. And so we'll put our bullet on top of the case, perch it up there, run it up inside, and it's already touching and pushing it out a little bit. So let's screw it in a little bit. And there it goes. Now, can you see it's getting, you can see that groove where we're going to. And there, it's getting there. You see it? Oh, almost there. A little bit more. That's the hair. And yep, that's it right there. Okay, now I'm gonna tighten the nut on top. You thought the nut on top was me, didn't you? Okay, that's it. So there it is. Now we have seated a bullet in it. Let's do one more so we'll have it to use with the final crimping die. So we'll just run that up in there like that. Yep, just right. See, just can barely see it peeking out through there, that little crimping groove. All right. All right, now we'll go to the Lee crimping die, which has these splits in it. And the way to adjust it is to run it all the way down until it touches the shell holder. Right there. And then for a moderate crimp, a normal, typical crimp, you give it a half a turn more. 2, 3, right there. And then you can tighten the lock ring by hand. The Lee lock ring has a rubber O-ring in it so it won't move. Now, I can feel it. It really gets tight, and that's that. Let me show you what's happening from overhead. All right, first let's see how it closes. See? And if we screw it in a little more, it's not quite closing all the way, but that's probably plenty. Let's just do that. Let's don't overdo it. Now when we put our bullet case in there, it comes up and squeezes together on it. And then there's our crimped cartridge. That's actually a very nice crimp right there. Can you see the little line just below the mouth where the crimp worked? It's in there good and tight. And just to show it to you from the outside, that's it. And there it is, crimped. Let's look at that. Tell you what, just for fun, let's go in a little bit more until it reaches a point where it, okay, that's too far. Okay, that's all the way closed. That's a maximum crimp right there. And yeah, I like that even better. That's it. So if we just let the die do its thing, close all the way, then we'll be happy. Let me show you that from overhead again. I'm going to give you a before and after. Here is the uncrimped cartridge. I'll put it down in there, and notice that the jaws will go all the way together this time. Right, see there? And then let's look at that. How does that look? Yep, very pronounced crimp right there. Couldn't ask for better. So here are 3 setup rounds that we did. Of course, we didn't put any primers or powder in them, so they're just dummies. Kind of a shame. Why don't we take them apart so we can reuse this? How would we do that? Well, a couple of ways. By far the easiest is with a nutcracker type or an inertia bullet puller. And you just drop your cartridge down in it and tighten the little collet. Go down here to a barbell that I've got on the floor. And there it is. It's loose. So you come up with it and you unscrew this thing on the end, and out comes your bullet and your case, and you put another one in there, tighten it down. Can you see it's a collet? We're on collets today. Reach underneath. There it is. And you just loosen it up. Out they come. Here's the way it goes in. And just drop your case in there. Tighten it up. A little wax. Loosen it. And out they come. Cool, huh? Here's a tip. Take the priming post off and replace it with a lid measuring cup from a bottle of Tide, a jug of Tide washing soap. And you'll need a 5/8 inch, a 5/16 bolt, and it needs to be a 1/2 inch long. I don't have one that short. My shortest one was 3/4, so I'm having to pack in a few washers under it here to get it down in there, but it'll work. It'll work just fine. And you get that like that, and that will stop the thing. Then take a piece of paper towel and just pack it down in there, and that'll keep them from bouncing out. And they don't have to be particularly neat. And yeah, does it work? Oh yeah. All right, so here's the boring part. We take all of our lubricated cases, put them in a tray, and have another tray standing by. Let's get up a little bit higher so we can get a little leverage here. Yeah, there we go. And take them out. And do that until the whole pile is gone, and you can come back and show you some more. 3. I will warn you that this is one of the few times you can really screw up, and that is when you put the case in there. They're kind of sticky. If you should pull back on it slightly, just ever so slightly, when it goes up, it will hit the edge of the die, and because it is so thin, it will crumble before you realize what's happened. So you got to be sure it's in there every time. And with the primer, and it'll be just fine. That's about the only thing you can mess up. And the very last one. Ta-da! And I am proud to tell you I did not damage a single one. And I also started standing up toward the end just to give myself a break. Not that it took a long time, I guess 10 minutes or so. But all the primers went into the cup. Happy about that. That was probably 30 or 40 out of roughly 100 that I've done over here. Okay, we're done with phase one, which is this first die, which is resizing and depriming. And since we had to lubricate these, it will be a good idea at this point in time to clean them up. So for the rest of the reloading operation, we won't be dealing with sticky cases that are just going to accumulate dirt. So we'll toss them in the tumbler for, in the vibrator deal for a few minutes just to clean them off. You probably won't be able to hear me from over there. I was going to give you a little sneak peek at something I've been working on here in my green screen studio. Stuff's just piled up right now. What I've built here is a kind of a portable reloading table, but something where I can set up to do demonstrations like what we got going on right here. And the idea being that I can, do a better job of it out here. The only problem, it's out here in my, as our friends in the UK would say, it's out here in my garage. And my garage is hot right now. It's still September, and it's hot and muggy and humid out here. So we're gonna have to wait a little bit, but I'll show you this table, how I built it, and all the neat features. Got a place here for presses, and pretty nifty. And we'll get into all that here in the near future. But for now, let's clean them. Now we got our brass retrieved from the tumbler out there in the garage, and they're nice and clean, no sticky lanolin or anything on them. I think I let them run about 30 minutes. It didn't really need that long. Didn't hurt it either, but I had something to do, so I went and did it. So now we finished with step one, which was to knock out the primer and squeeze them back down to original size. And so that was here. Now we move to step two. Could not be easier. We just run them up into that die, which expands the mouth, as you recall. And it makes it so that the bullet, when it goes in there, won't fall off, and it will be ready to seat in a future step. So that's all we got to do. Just do this over and over and over until we're through, and we'll see you back here in a little bit. 4, 5, 99, 100, or whatever the number actually is. I have my seat kind of way up high so I get better leverage. It's a nice thing about these stools. You can do that. All right, that concludes that step with die number 2. Die number 3 will be coming up, and that's where we're going to put the bullet in there and seat it. But before we do that, we have 2 things to do. One, we have to put a primer in, new primer, and 2, we have to add powder. And then we will put it into the bullet seater, and we'll seat the bullet, and then we'll crimp it later. Okay. Priming. There's a lot of different ways to do priming, and when I'm not doing that many, like this many right here, I really like this hand primer here from RCBS. I've tried several different ones. Let's see, I've got where is it? Yeah. I think everybody's got one of these, a little Lee. These things really work. They do. There's a couple things about them I don't like. They have this proprietary shell holder. On the other hand, you can buy a whole set of them, and they're not expensive, which of course everybody does, and that's fine. The main thing is that it gets your thumb if you're doing a lot, or it does get mine anyway, but it does a good job. This is just a little heavier duty. I also like the fact that you can put 100 primers in there, which actually is not that easy to do with the Lee, because the box of primers is bigger than the little shaker, you know, the primer holder, flipper, whereas here it's smaller. So anyway, let's move in close and I'll show you what this thing's all about, and then we'll prime up. We're going to actually find out how many cases we have here now, because with the primers we have an accurate count. All right, this is the thing. It has one tray for all primers, and you just press that little thing in the middle there, and that'll pop it loose. And then you take your 100 primers, and the easiest thing to do is that, and then you don't have to sort them out. And one corner of this thing is open, and that's the end that has to go down here to the feeder. Okay, and there is this hole in the middle that you don't want to have blocked, and you put this on here. Now I will show you one thing I definitely don't like here, and that's it right there. Once that thing pops in to the halfway point, a great deal of the primers get flipped. So you have to do the old shakerino, but it's not too bad. And that's it. So, and there's a little tab, on here to prevent just exactly that, which I didn't have closed. Okay. A little cutoff tab, so you won't accidentally spill your primers. Here we can see our primer, and then we snap our case into place, and we squeeze, and then here's our case. All right, we're ready to do the powder, and I've adjusted this so it's supposed to be doing 2.4 grains of powder. So what I'm going to do is, here's a little trick we can do to really test it. 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we take these 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the scale's set on 24. 10. Okay, that's a little bit more than that. Let's see what we got here. 24.3. So that means the average weight was 2.43 grains. That's pretty darn close. That's not bad. and that's measuring it under actual conditions. It's a good thing to check like that. So now we'll fill them all up with powder. I used to use a very aggressive metering technique where I would wrap the thing up, tap it a couple of times, come back down, tap it a couple of times. A lot of hard hitting. And then I ran across the notion somewhere, I don't recall, but somebody maybe on YouTube had tested various methods and discovered that what I'm doing right here generally gives the most consistent results. And I proved it to myself, so this is how I do it. And yep. You know, your mileage may vary. By the way, the powder that I'm using is Trail Boss, and I chose to use it because it gives a very mild, low pressure load, which will be great for that little gun because it's old, it's small, it is not designed for heavy loads. I've read several instances of people damaging that specific gun, or that specific model, using, heavier loads. And Mike Venturino, a person I really admire and have followed since he first started with a little Lee pistol rest. Back in the 70s. Mike swears by this stuff, says it's just the only powder he uses now in the older cartridges. So, who am I to say? In Ken Waters' book of Pet Loads, and this was, gosh, I'd have to look at the date, but it was years and years ago when he wrote it. He wrote an article on the 3220 in revolvers, and his go-to powder was SR 4756, a powder that I have used a lot over the years, but has been discontinued for some time now. I don't know if you could find any or not. I kind of doubt it. I've still got just a little bit left, but I wanted to try this. In fact, I did load some before with this, and I wasn't just knocked out by it. So, Trail Boss, if you don't know, is an extremely bulky powder. I've got 2.4 grains of the powder in there. The range that Hogden gives for it is 2.1 to 2.5 grains. So I'm going with 2.4, and I'll be daring, but not that daring. There are bold reloaders, there are old reloaders, but there are no old bold reloaders, you know that. Anyway, it's very bulky, and so even though it's only 2.5 or 2.4 grains in there, it really fills the case up almost, well, about a third of the way. Where was I? Right there, okay. The other thing I like about this method is after you get through, you put the loading tray on your bench under a good light and just look at it And if you miss one, oh boy, will it ever more show up. And if you double charge one, it'll show up. Either one of those would just pretty much ruin your day. If you had an empty case, the primer would probably cause the bullet to lodge in the barrel a little bit anyway, and you'd wind up with a lot of cursing and beating because the cylinder would probably be, you know, it'd be half in and half out of the cylinder, and it'd be all locked up, and yeah, it's just a mess. And a double charge would probably blow your precious little gun up. So you don't want either one of those. And this method is so good for being able to catch that kind of error. By the way, even though I'm sitting here talking to you, and it's kind of in violation of what I normally do, but I never like to have anybody in here when I'm doing this kind of step. It's just so easy to become distracted. You got somebody else in here, and when you stop for an interruption of some sort, that's where mistakes can happen. And there are 3 possible things that can happen, and 2 of them are bad. So this is an RCBS powder measure. I've had it since I started reloading back in 1972, and it's just as good as ever. I did an upgrade on it. I contacted RCBS and they sent me the part for free. There's a little spring that goes onto the right here onto the metering adjustment, and a spring washer and a nicer nut. The original actually just had a nut you had to do with a wrench, and I had adjusted, I'd messed with that thing so much it was all boogered up. I'd done it with pliers and I don't know what all. And so found out about this, and this spring just holds the tension, and you can turn it, you can turn the adjustment with your finger, and it'll just stay right there wherever you put it. And you should be aware that RCBS makes 2 drums for this part that's rotating here, a regular and a pistol. The regular covers a pretty broad range, and it's especially good for large charges for rifles and large pistol charges. But when you want to do a small amount, you can't beat this pistol one. It has a much smaller diameter cavity in there, so it can meter out a small quantity more accurately. And that's it. All right, and put them under the light and take a look. All right, here's the bullet seating process. We take our case that's filled with powder. We take our bullet and we put it there, and because it's flared slightly, it fits. And I'm going to run it most of the way, but not quite all the way. And you see how there's almost to the top of that crimp groove. But when I go all the way, that did it right there. Put it right at the top edge of that crimp groove. And I'm going to move it over here and run it through the crimp. And that's our finished product right there. And that's what it looks like. So now all I got to do is, there's 141 of these, by the way. So all I have to do now is just load them up. Well, after a little trial and error, I've decided that the method that works best is to take advantage of the turret and seat the bullet and crimp it like that, and then put it over here in the box. Now, it makes sense because if you take it out here, that means later you're going to have to pick it back up and do that operation and whatnot. So the hand motion, I think, more than makes up for I don't know. Seems to be the better way to do it. It's not, I don't think it's a big deal either way. You got to pay attention though. And either method would work. But this way, when I get through, I can drop it over here in the box. And incidentally, I want to show you this box. This is, talk about, what, serendipity, is that the word? Or kismet or something like that. Let me show you. This little box is a bolt box. And my local bolt house frequently has extra ones left over. Let me do one here and I'll drop it in. And where they've emptied the boxes and put them in the bins for sell as, to sell as loose items. And look at that. It matches the dimensions of the cartridges exactly. Now, I don't know about this way, but it's perfect that way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, it's not, it's going to be a weird number, but that doesn't matter at all. And they just look so nice, and I'll fix up some nice labels for the box. And they're real heavy-duty boxes because they're constructed to hold bolts and nuts, which are heavy. Oops, it's kind of in your way. Want to pay attention, Rex. And so, the fact that they can do that makes them ideal for holding ammunition. I'm sure I'm blocking the view here. Yeah. All right, here goes the last one out of the first tray, which would make it 56. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, my neat stack. I'm going to have to get in there and fix that. Okay, it wasn't hard to fix. Just sort it out, straighten it out. So now I'll start on the second batch of 56. Looks like I'll probably get 9 rows in here, and that would be 81. But I might get 10, which would be 90. But we will see what we will see. It doesn't really matter to me. I think I mentioned early on, and if I didn't, I meant to, that a cartridge like the 3220 is just a dream for hand loading. And the reason is because you have at least 3 different levels of guns. You've got the little Colt, like I have, that's probably the weakest of them all in terms of frame strength because of its small size. And then you move up to the Smith & Wessons from the pre-war era, the Colt single actions, Colt Army, that sort of thing. And then finally, at the top, there's rifles like the Marlin 94 is chambered in that. The Winchester 92 is chambered in that, and that's a very, very strong John Browning action. Now, the 73 is not as strong. It's chambered in this, of course. That's where it started. But the point is that there are at least 3, if not 4, power levels that you could go for. And factory ammo is pretty much what little bit there is pretty much nothing but just the very lowest, because they have to be worst case scenario, lowest common denominator and all that. So by hand loading, you can tailor your loads to exactly what you'd want them to be. And although I will say the great bulk of what people are doing this day and time would be light loads like this for informal plinking, shooting old guns, and especially cowboy action shooting. So, but you see my point about it being that this is what reloading or hand loading is all about. I distinguish between reloading and hand loading. Reloading is just where you got typically 1 or 2 cartridges and you just want to keep them refilled. Hand loading is where you try everything under the sun. You try every kind of powder, every bullet, every caliber you can think of. You get into the obsession of collecting old reloading tools, and it just becomes a passion and a hobby. And so that's the difference between hand loading and reloading. Reloading is kind of like, shotguns. You don't do much experimentation, you just sort of do it. Nobody reloads for shotgun much anymore, I'm pretty sure, because it just about would cost you more to reload them buying the components. Shotgun shells are pretty reasonable, except maybe slugs, something like that. If you could cast them. Oh, speaking of casting, I wanted to tell you, this bullet, the more I pick them up and put them in here, the more impressed I am with them. This is a beautiful bullet. I want to give a big shout out to these people at Badman Bullets. Is that what it was? And as you know, I don't get any kind of, I buy everything. What is it? Badman Bullets. And it's www.badman Bullets. I had never bought them before. And another thing too, well, here's some that I tested on the Lee Hardness Tester. And they all tested out at about 12 Brunel, which was absolutely perfect for my way of thinking. This is kind of like you would do with black powder. The point is that when it's softer like that, not 18 or 20, then the bullet, the base of the bullet will bump up. When the pressure hits it, it's soft enough that it'll squish out to fill out the grooves and the chamber and everything, just making for a much more accurate bullet. And at these kind of velocities, you're not the least bit worried about leading. But I'm here to tell you, leading is probably caused more by ill-fitting bullets than fast bullets. And so, anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. But these are really, really nice bullets. I mean, I just can't get over the consistency. Even the lube is, it almost looks like it's painted on there. It's so uniform. And a little bevel base, while it's not my favorite in terms of accuracy, because the base of the bullet is the driving force, and generally flat base bullets are a little better, but these bevel base bullets are a lot easier to get started into the case. And with a really thin wall case like this 3220, that's a big deal. So this is not a target match situation anyway. I'm going to be shooting minute of barn door out there, with it. I'll be lucky to hit the side of a barn door with it. But what much fun we will have. Ooh, I think we're going to maybe get one more row on there. This will be fun. All right. I'll shut up and probably not come back until I'm done, unless I think of some wonderful bit of information that you absolutely have to know. I left my powder measure set up over here, by the way. in case anything goes wrong. If I drop one and spill it and all like that, then I won't have to go reset everything again. That one's, come on, you can do it. Get that, there you go. I don't know. I think we can definitely get some more in there. Whether it'll be a row of 9, I don't know. But, yeah, reloading is not only fun, it's exciting. Yeah. Now, no. I think I'm going to have to just sort of cheat and drop that one in there that way. I'm not sure we're going to get... Oh, that's something I was going to tell you about. Dropping that bullet on the floor made me think about it. Years ago, I bought a work mat, or a cushion. Yeah, I'm going to have to skip every other one. A floor cushion. And when you stand on it, of course, it just makes a world of difference to your back and all like that. But it turns out, for my purposes, I've probably gotten more benefit out of it by having things fall on the floor and not get damaged. If a bullet falls, a soft lead bullet falls onto a hard tile floor like this one, there's a good chance it will be deformed. And if it's the base, then you just pretty much ruin that bullet. There it is. I think it's full. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. So we got a box of 85, 32, 20 bullets. And well, it's one of those boxes with ears, you know, that really goes up tight. Now I have to make some really nice labels for it. And this is what Trail Boss powder looks like. How about them apples? Little ringlets, little donuts, little bagels or something. That's it, that's what they look like. And they're kind of very, very light. As I put away this powder, I'll share a little trick with you. But what the trick is, and most of you already know this, but if you don't, get used dryer, softener, fabric static things, whatever they call them, and stuff them down in here when you're not using it. And that will remove static electricity, so you won't have any static buildup in there, and the powder won't be doing crazy stuff, and it'll just pour right out. That's your free trick. Well, as my friend down in South Alabama used to say, that had ought to do it. And I think we're wrapped up on this one now. We have loaded up about 150 rounds of 32-20. Got us some labels. Got some detail labels on here somewhere. Yeah, back here with all the date and powder and blah, blah, blah. Got our little Colt pistol, got our Trail Boss powder, our Badman bullets, our Winchester primers, our RCBS priming tool, Redding dyes, Hollywood press, and Starline brass. I guess that was it. So I hope this was a bit helpful to you, especially if you're kind of new to this hobby. It's really a great one. I hope you'll stick with it, and we hope to have some more. And by the way, what I hope to do is to very soon, in the next few days, get out to the range with this pistol, a chronograph, some targets, and these loads, and let's find out what we got here. Maybe we did a little better this time than I did before. And either way, I'll let you know, okay? I may be embarrassed, but I will let you know. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.